Yesterday's dreams of electric-powered air taxis and flying cars are turning into real urban air mobility projects. This is the Future of Air Transportation, a podcast from the experts at TE Connectivity. Join us as we turn dreams of the future into reality. Hello everyone, and welcome to Connected World, a podcast from the experts at TE Connectivity. I'm your host, Tyler Kern. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the program. Now, today is another episode in our Future of Transportation Urban Air Mobility series, and joining me to discuss how relays and contactors help distribute power in eVTOL systems and TE's expertise in these areas is Marcus Priest. He's the Senior Principal Engineer at TE Connectivity. Marcus, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me this morning.
Well, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you, Marcus, and continue this series today. So let's start off just with this introductory question here. How is TE positioned to serve the system's requirements?
Well, TE's being a supplier to some of the world's largest aerospace companies already, we provide a vast array of products that are well suited for these platforms. Also, being one of the most innovative companies in the space, we're always ready to provide products for emerging markets, emerging needs in the aerospace markets.
So what are some of the challenges posed by these new vehicles in terms of component needs and things of that nature?
Well, I would say one of the most challenging aspects certainly is the movement to higher and higher working voltages for these systems. So this impacts not only the individual switching components themselves, but the wire, the cabling, and the connectors as well.
Now, how does TE provide solutions in terms of increased power handling while still maintaining an advantage with regard to size, weight, and power, things like that?
Well, our main focus over the years has been with regard to what we call the Size, Weight, and Power Initiative, or some people call it SWAP. And as you can imagine, while it might be easy to solve some of these problems while going to larger and heavier devices, really the challenge is to keep things light and small, since most of these vehicles we're talking about now are going to be smaller and lighter. And so we've been able to leverage some of our innovations in IP that allow us to provide for more power handling capabilities in smaller packages. So for example, our typical approach is to take an existing successful design, and then we kind of say to ourselves, well, how can we get more performance in that same package and weight, or perhaps even smaller? So in that way, we're always pushing ourselves to anticipate and be ahead of the needs for more power in smaller sized devices.
So what are some recent examples of a solution that was perhaps a bit of a stretch in terms of providing a unique solution to a system design where a product had not maybe existed before?
Well, requirements for something like a megawatt switching capability is one instance where we've been able to use previous products and reconfigure the internal construction to be able to double the working voltage and current. And those demands are coming simultaneously from the high-end EV industry and aerospace requirements related to the large commercial aircraft electrification. Another example relates to some eVTOL in the urban air mobility market. And in that case, we were able to take one of our 150 amp high voltage DC latching contactors that we use typically in manned space flight and other aerospace applications, and we were able to reduce the weight and volume by about 50% in that product, and it made a great match for a small eVTOL craft that's being developed right now by one of the major players in that market.
So, Marcus, are there any similarities in these newer urban vehicle systems where TE has been able to draw on experiences with other markets and other technology and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I would say definitely. The power distribution systems that are being architected for these vehicles are very similar to those used in commercial and military aircraft that's already served by TE. So we're very familiar with those types of systems in terms of electrical and environmental requirements. And we already have products in some of those spaces, and certainly things are always in development in that regard.
So explain a little bit about how TE is able to leverage its experience in commercial and military aerospace to provide solutions to some of the urban air mobility platforms.
Well, first of all, TE has the experience and the pedigree of being on many of the major flying systems using 270-volt DC power switching. And not to mention all the wire, cable, connectors, and bus barring that's used in those systems as well. Another area is We've had experience in designing and qualifying and manufacturing and deploying product for many, many years in these systems. And so that means we have the knowledge and proven track record of getting products into these harsh and high reliability environments. And of course, the relationships that we've developed with some of the most major players and airframe manufacturers in the industry, that's definitely a big plus.
So where do you see this technology going in the future, and how is TE well positioned to help maybe lead the way as a system solution provider?
Well, certainly as the needs for more power progresses and higher voltage systems are going to emerge. So we expect there will be more of an emphasis on distributed power, if you will. So power systems similar to something in the utility grid area. So this is going to require higher voltage capabilities for airframe wiring and connectors, and also smarter switching products that can communicate with a system controller or system communication bus. So the sort of monolithic power distribution boxes of the past will probably become less desirable over time. So TE is currently already moving forward in those areas, and we're developing also smart solid-state switching products that we can match well with our electromechanical switching products, and those together are very well suited for distributed power systems.
So are there any synergies between the urban air mobility space and that of, say, electric vehicles and that sort of thing?
Well, they appear to be very similar, certainly, from the perspective of power sources and controlling of motors and the increased need for autonomy and operation. So we see that the component requirements coming out of the urban air mobility market is very similar to that of the EV market. And many of the advances in EVs, we think, surely will find their way into the urban air market. So TE expects to continue to be involved in both. So within our company also, we can interact with our colleagues in the hybrid electric mobility group, and together we can innovate to the benefit of both areas.
And as we begin to wrap up our conversation here today, Marcus, how can our listeners get more information regarding TE solutions related to urban air mobility and electroflight system needs?
Well, going straight to te.com is certainly a great place to start. And you can also look to te.com/urban-air-mobility. You can contact myself, Marcus Priest, at marcus.priest@te.com. Or certainly feel free to contact Mr. Martin Cullen. He's the Senior Business Development Manager, and he's at martin.cullen@te.com.
And another fellow guest of the podcast, Martin Cullen. So if you missed his episode, make sure to go check that out as well. Marcus, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast and giving us some details in this area around the future of urban air mobility, the future of transportation. We're looking forward to future episodes of the podcast and seeing these things become an increasing reality here in the future.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure talking to you.
And everyone, thank you for tuning into this episode of Connected World, a podcast from the experts at TE Connectivity. For more episodes just like this, go subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay up to date with the latest from the experts at TE Connectivity. And stay tuned for more episodes. We'll be back soon with the next episode of Connected World. But until then, for my guest today, Marcus Priest, I've been your host, Tyler Kern. Thanks so much for listening.